Good evening, Washington, D.C. This is Tony Browder, your host of the Browder File Show. This is episode number 6. I'd like to thank everyone who came out last Saturday to hear last week's guest, Wayne Chandler, who spoke at the Thurgood Marshall Center. And during the course of Wayne's presentation, I had the opportunity to meet several people who've heard my show, but who've never met me before. I also had the opportunity to see friends who I've known for years and who've listened to my show. And both groups, the newcomers and those who've known me for a while, have been sharing with me how much they enjoy the program and the various guests that I've had on my program. So I thank you so much for listening and trust that you will continue to listen as my listenership grows. So I've been a listener and supporter of WPFW since their inception in 1977. Numerous hosts on various shows on WPFW and their guests have helped to shape my understanding of history and current events. And so I'm grateful today for the opportunity to give back to WPFW through my program, through the Browder File Show. And I trust that this program will help shape the understanding of history and culture and current events of my listeners. And as you all should know, WPFW is a listener-supported radio. WPFW is in the process of moving from their current location in Northwest Washington to a new location in Northeast Washington. So moving costs time and resources, and WPFW certainly could benefit from your financial support as they prepare to complete this move and build out their new studio spaces. So since we are in a season of giving, I'm asking all of my listeners to my show and to the station, if you will consider making an end of the year tax-deductible contribution to WPFW. As you know, you can give online at WPFW.org, or you can call at 202-588-9739, 202-588-9739, or 1-800-222-9739. You can make a contribution, and I urge you to give
Hey,
until.
we're not in pledge drive. You can't do that yet. Can't do that yet.
Okay, I can't do that yet. All right, well,
Yes. We're in pledge drive. December 16th.
got it. So yeah, so just remember WPFW. Keep them in your hearts, and be prepared to continue to support a station that has given so much to you. I would appreciate it immensely, and I'm sure everyone affiliated with the station would appreciate your generosity as well. So now to get on to today's show. You know, as a society, we've been socialized to celebrate the birth of certain people and to also mourn the death of others. Currently, we're mourning the passing of Nikki Giovanni, who passed on Monday, December the 9th. And yesterday, my family commemorated the 117th birthday of my maternal grandfather, Eddie Walker. My grandfather lived from 1907 to 1967. And so as I think about his life and the lives of people who've meant the world to me, you know, I come to understand that the essence of a person's life is summed up in that space between the date of their birth and the date of their passing. That space, which is often represented on obituaries and tombstones, is typically presented by a dash, right? That dash, that space between the date of their birth and the date of their death. And what that space, that tiny space represents are all of the memories left behind that ultimately determine how that person will be remembered for all time. So when you think about the significance of that, whoever controls the memories within that space, that tiny space, influences present and future events. This is a simple yet powerful reality. And all of us, have been socialized or programmed by the memories that we carry in our consciousness. All of our memories have been shaped and determined oftentimes by people that we will never know. And we are, in essence, the culmination of the thoughts and ideas which formulate the beliefs or the memories that shape our lives. What we believe shapes how we live and how we worship. What we believe shapes who we like and who we dislike. What we believe determines the degree of our cognitive dissonance, our capacity to listen to opposing ideas. Growing up in the United States, we were all socialized to believe in myths concerning December the 25th, myths about Santa Claus, myths about Christmas, myths about the birth of Jesus. And for those of you who aren't afraid of dispelling myths or overcoming the limits of program cognitive dissonance, today's show is for you. Today's show will create new memories for some. It will also reinforce old memories for some others. Today's show will focus on time. It will talk about the construction of time frames and timelines. It will talk about how time constructs have influenced our memories of the past, which in turn shape our present and determine our future thoughts and activities. My guest today is Paul Obinna. Paul is a resident of the UK. He's an educator. He's an artist. He is a change agent. He's a thinker. And many of you have seen me discuss the timeline of African history and world history, which Paul created about 2 decades ago. So Paul, my brother, welcome to the Browder File Show. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. Very good, thank you.
Oh, wonderful. Well, look, man, before we get into our discussion, I want to let the audience know that Paul is a brother after my own heart. He has a wealth of information, and he could talk for hours on one given subject matter. But since we only have an hour for this show, I've asked Paul to limit his responses so that we can cover as much ground as possible within the time frame that we have here for this show. And trust me, Paul is one of my thought partners, and so we will have him back throughout the coming year. So today is just going to give you a taste of what is to come. So for today's show, I've asked Paul to discuss 4 topics. The 4 topics are: 1, what is time and how does it impact our lives? 2, what is the relationship between terrestrial time and cosmic time? 3, what is the BC and AD construct? And the 4th question is, what is the significance of Paul's timeline? So Paul is only going to have about 8 minutes or so to answer each question. And so I've instructed him to give short and concise responses so that we can delve into the essence of each question. And if we have additional time, I'll have him elaborate. So Paul, you got the parameters for today's show. And
I have.
yes, you do.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
And I know you're fully capable and competent of fulfilling my request. So let's jump into it, man.
Okay.
Let's talk about time. I consider you a time master of sorts, a horologist, right? A person who has a profound understanding and appreciation of time. So give me your understanding of what time is and how time impacts our lives.
The quantification of natural phenomena. So, for instance, if I ask you, but then we've been conditioned to think a certain way about it. Start off with this one. They say, who does time belong to? And they say, no man, meaning no mind. However, the last 2 letters of time say me. So I always say time belongs to me. I control my relationship with it. If I ask people in general, I'll say, what is a day? And they usually will say 24 hours. And then I say to them, what was my question? And they say, what is a day? I said, what did you give me the answer to? They say, oh, how long is a day? So why did you just quantify instead of telling me what the actual thing is? So for instance, a day, they say, is 1 rotation of the Earth around its axis, unless you're a flat earther. And so you've got 1 rotation of the Earth around its own axis. How long does that take? 23 hours, 57, or whatever. You know, it's just say 24 hours, it's rounded. They say, what is a month? A month is the time it takes the moon to orbit the Earth once. How long does that take? Roughly 28 days. Therefore, how many months are there a year? There are 12 solar months and 13 lunar months. Because the Earth, it takes, if you take 12 times 28, it gives you 336, which is 29 days short of 365. So we have these quantifications, and a choice has been made how we're going to revere time. A year is the time it takes the Earth and the Moon to go around the Sun one time. So I've been on 65 journeys around the Sun. So after that year, we go to the great year. And that's a universal term, turning, which is now, we say, we're going from the age of Pisces into Aquarius. These are periods of 2,150 years, approximately. So what is time? It's about quantification of what is natural, but we rationalize it with our left brain because that's how we've been trained to think in the schooling system.
Cool. All right, thank you, man. That was 5 minutes, Paul. You on the roll. So we're going to be able to cover a lot of topics today. So in your
practice, you truncated my time. Okay.
And we all are going to be the beneficiary of that truncation. All right, so I like the way you broke it down in terms of talking about the rotation of the Earth on its axis, and then the revolution of the moon around the Earth and the moon revolving around the sun. So let's explore this second question I have for you. Delve a little bit deeper into this relationship between terrestrial time here on Earth and cosmic time within the cosmos in general, our universe and the multiverse, which impacts us on a quantum scale.
Okay, so what we have, we are given a limited scope of what time is. So for instance, to say time is the master, so whoever engineers time controls things. It's a really, just start out terrestrial time. We have a thing called GMT, Greenwich Mean Time, which was agreed at the conference in your beloved capital there in DC in 1884. So the European nations got together with some, I don't know, I can't see how it got Guatemala in there. That's the one that always jumps to mind. They got together and made Greenwich Prime Meridian 0.
Mm-hmm.
So what it means is every 15 degrees in the 360, every 15 degrees equals 1 hour. So now I'm at 12 minutes past 10. And my time, I take it you're 12 minutes past 5.
Exactly.
So you're 5 hours behind us, which led to your involvement in the Second World War and the First World War. You were like years behind everybody else. But that's a side. Anyway, so what happens is you have to make your mind up time. So what happens is that whole structure of the 24 hours means that Greenwich is prime meridian 0. Now, the guy who used to be at the Greenwich Meridian used to sell time. He got a watch, and then he'd set his watch and then go around to shopkeepers and different people and sell them the accurate time. So this idea of what time is, it's in actual fact is very interesting because it is a construct. It's like when people talk about the matrix. It's just like that. There's a construct. So there's real time, which is the time where actually the sun will be hitting one part of the earth. But then we've standardized it now to periods of 15 degrees, which make 1 hour.
Right. And let me just ask you to elaborate on something that you glossed over. And I don't want my listeners here in DC to bypass that point when you referenced the 1884 meeting at Meridian International House on 16th Street, directly across the street from Meridian Hill Park, is the location where former president of the United States convened a meeting with officials from a number of European nations who met at that house in order to decide what the new prime meridian was going to be. And they selected your country, the country of your residence, the UK, as prime meridian, or what's referred to in the military as Zulu time, 0 degrees on the meridian. And then everyone else calibrated their time based on that. So if someone can come together and bring together other national leaders and say, we are going to move time and space, move it from the what had been the primary meridian for thousands of years at the Great Pyramid at Giza Plateau to Greenwich, England. We're talking about uh, power beyond imaginings. You know, if you
Oh,
can control time and move time, you can do just about anything, huh?
they actually call it the center of time and space, Greenwich Meridian,
Mm-hmm.
which if you're Muslim, that would be Allah,
Right.
your
Right.
concept of the creator or God.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, with the creation of Greenwich as the prime meridian, then that was a way of calibrating all terrestrial time. But I'd like for you to speak briefly about cosmic time and the other things that are happening outside of Earth that influence all activities on planet Earth and cannot be dismissed.
Well, do you know, I love this time of year because they actually say, I've got to say, in my reality, it was the only time of year that the white folk didn't beat up on me on whatever. So when I was growing up. So I always loved the Christmas period. But they always have this thing of the visitation to the Christ child. And one group of people who came were called the Magi. And you put a C on the end of the word Magi, it says magic, the magicians, who foretold the arrival of the Christ child with astrology and followed astronomy.
Mm-hmm.
So if you look at, there's an interesting thing for me. I love etymology. I look into dictionary. I've got my dictionary open here. Um, I love etymology because it gives you the historical developments of words.
Mm-hmm.
And what happens is that when you look at the term magi and the magicians, they arrived and were foretold the arrival of the Christ child. What's actually happened to the English language? Did I say English, Mr. Browder? English language,
Yeah, you did, man. You did.
not American, not American. The English language. What happens is they eradicated the so-called occult meanings of certain words. So that, for instance, the word influence is it's used to describe, you know, when we get the flu, la influenza, they thought was a visitation of an evil spirit,
Mm-hmm.
but it's microbiology. I had the flu last week, and what I learned is that, as Dr. Sebi will be saying, the removal of mucus from the body. If we've internalized things that aren't positive, the mucus is coming out, it brings it out. But they actually described it as being a visitation of an evil spirit. But then it also is defined as the inflow from the stars of an ethereal fluid supposedly affecting the destiny of men. And it says to affect sublunary things as well also. So anything under the moon, anything about, so there's the moon goes around us. You got the term lunatic.
Which is a British term, I understand. It was the Brits who were managing an insane asylum and noticed that there were some people who only went crazy during the period of the
The
full
lunar
moon.
cycle.
Mm-hmm.
But of course you have as well the story of the werewolf,
Mm-hmm.
who turns into a beast every full moon and
Mm-hmm.
has to seek blood. So the blood, full moon, the lunar cycle is a menstrual cycle also.
Mm-hmm.
So they'd be saying that if you are trapped over in your feminine brain, which is the right hemisphere of the brain, the source of the Akashic records, is, if you will, the dialogue that goes between the right and left hemisphere, where you have denoted masculine and feminine. So it's a very interesting thing for me that the words that have a power of understanding and comprehension of the metaphysical, this is metaphysics, not physics, metaphysics,
Mm-hmm.
they've actually turned away from that. So words like influence, words like genius, which it means two opposed spirits attending each person, influencing them powerfully for good or for ill.
Mm-hmm.
So we have, which of those things would you want to nurture in yourself or your children? So
So
this,
I was going
sorry.
to say, there's also a mythology that goes along with these terms and these concepts. And since you referenced the three magi, I'd like for you to share with our listeners the concept of the three magi following the star rising in the east, which would lead them to the Christ child, and tie that to astronomical phenomena that occurs during this time of year.
Well, what we actually have at this time of year is the shortening of the days, the daylight hours. And so what happens is this is a thing which the Germans call Yuletide, which means wheel. They said the wheel of the sun was moving through the sky, and then it gets to the 21st of December, stops still for 3 days, the 22nd, 23rd, 24th. And then on the 25th of December, the wheel, will start to move back across the sky. And so hence Yuletide. We know this about the daylight hours getting shorter, shorter, shorter. Then we get to the sun still, the solstice. And then on the 25th of December, they said the sun, S-U-N, was reborn, was born again. Not the son as in Jesus. There's a natural phenomenon on which the Christian church has started to celebrate the birth of the Christ child on that day. Interestingly enough, the daylight hours get longer again up until the 21st of March. And then what happens on the 21st of March, you have 12 hours of day, 12 hours of night. Then what they did is take the early Christian, the Roman Catholic Church, Pope Victor, who they say was the first of three African popes, followed by Gelasius and Miltiades. So Pope Victor I placed the worship of Easter by what he did is go to the equinox, 12 hours a day, 12 hours of night. Then he go to the next full moon, and then Easter Sunday was the Sunday following the full moon, following the spring equinox. These are natural phenomenon, natural phenomenon. But what they were doing, that was the beginning. The 21st was the beginning of spring.
Mm-hmm.
So the greenery, the shoot, new life springing forward. So they were using that dynamic to say this is like the rebirth of Christ, the death and rebirth of Christ, which is the greatest of the Christian phenomenon.
Okay. So look, I mean, you just laid out a lot, and I really want our listeners to follow and understand the blending of science and mythology. So December the 25th was chosen by members of the Roman Catholic Church as the day to celebrate the birth of Jesus Christ, but this date was chosen like 300 plus years after the supposed birth of Jesus Christ. And then the date of his execution and resurrection is a date that constantly shifts. So every year we celebrate the birth of Jesus on December the 25th, but every year you celebrate the resurrection of Jesus at a different date. So, we celebrated my grandfather's birthday yesterday. So we know the date that he was born. We also know the date that he died, April the 16th, 1967. So we know the date that Martin Luther King died. We know the date that Malcolm X died. That date is etched in stone. So why is it that the date of Jesus's death constantly changes? And as you just said, the date of Jesus's resurrection, death and resurrection is always the first Sunday after the first full moon following the spring equinox. So help a brother understand what this whole thing is about, this relationship between cosmic time and terrestrial time.
So watch this. How often does your grandfather's birthday align on the same day?
I haven't looked at it, but I'm sure it follows a specific pattern.
There'll be a pattern, but what it is, they're figuring out the solar and the lunar. They was figuring out the relationship between the solar time, which goes to the equinoxes and the solstices, and then that's a relation to the 13 orbits of the Earth by the moon. So you know the mandala, that if a woman gets a birth date, is given an approximate birth date, there's a chart which aligns the sun, the solar, and the lunar, because the time in the womb is lunar, not solar.
9 months.
Yeah, so you have to get these two things. So a lot of people that go like, oh, January, February, March, April, that doesn't work that way. So that's why there's a shift every year, because you're looking at the full moon, when the full moon will rise after the equinox. And so the full moon will adjust itself. That's why it changes.
So basically what you're talking about is the fact that we have multiple calendar systems that we're using here on Earth based on the sun and based on the moon.
Oh, wow, yes.
Cultures have their own calendar. There's a Jewish calendar, there's an Islamic calendar, there's a Christian calendar,
Chinese
calendar, there's an Indian calendar. So other cultures have specific means of orienting themselves to Earth and celestial objects in the sky. That's natural.
That's it. So of course, the invention by the Catholic Church took place in the equivalent date, AD 525. So 525, 525 years after, they say, the birth of Christ. What they did at the birth of Christ, they just said, this is now called Anno Domini, year of the Lord. They stopped all time and started it off again. And so they start counting up. So that was the Western Roman Empire, Pope John I, and he got a guy called Dionysius Exiguus, who was a Scythian, southern Russian monk, to do that calculation. And what did they base it on? They based it on the 753 years since the foundation of Rome, because they were the Western Roman Empire, so they wanted to show that their ways were dominant on the earth. And so this was done AD 525, and then it started to gain precedent. All right, let me see. There's a band, it's a white rock band. Oh my gosh, what's their name now? I just sort of slip in there, but they have a song it's called Dire Straits. They're called Dire Straits.
Oh, Dire Straits, yeah.
And they have a track called The Man's Too Strong. And it says, I'm just an aging drummer boy, and in the wars I used to play, and I've called a tune to many a torture session. Now they say I'm a war criminal, and I'm fading away. Father, please hear my confession. This is the confession. I've legalized robbery, and I've called it with belief. I've called it belief. I've run with the money and hid like a thief. Rewritten history with armies of my crooks. Invented memories, I did burn all the books. But you can still hear his laughter, you can still hear his song. The man's too big, the man's too strong. I don't know what Mark Knopfler was writing about, but I can make that lyric fit. But what I'm trying to say to you is that this is a construct that was done. Then in AD 725 in England, a guy called the Venerable Bede invented the term BC, before Christ. So what, in stopping time in BC, we can go to like 5000 BC, then we go to 4099, 4000, and we just count, we count down to 1 BC, and then we go AD 1. So because they didn't deal with 0 as a concept, the numbers go from 1 to 9, and then on to 10, where we repeat with the 1 and the 0. So that's a denary number system. So that's why I call this restricted mindset, I call it the corral. I don't use the term matrix for the construct, because the term matrix means womb. So I will not disrespect the woman's womb, the mother's womb, by using it as a place of restriction. It's a place of growth. It's a generative starting point where generations of humanity meet together to form what we call children in the mother's womb. So I won't do that. So what I do is I call it.
Paul, let me hold you for 1 second and let our listeners know that it's 5:30. You're listening to WPFW. This is the Browder File here weekly on Wednesdays at WPFW 89.3 FM. I'm Tony Browder. We're here with our guest, Paul Obinna, who's talking about time. He's talking about time and giving us a better understanding of BC and AD and what all of this means and the ideas that have been created by man in order to corral men and women to function and feel comfortable functioning within these false constructs that impact every aspect of our lives. So continue, Paul.
Yes, so what I was saying is that the symbol that I decided to use for the chorale is a decagon, a 10-sided figure. Why? Because the decagon, the 10 sides, represents decade, century, and millennia. So that's 10 years, 100 years, and 1,000 years, all of which are just mere quantifications. So for instance, I was remembering, I always use a big pen, a 4-colored pen. I always carry these with me so I can make notes a certain way. And I always remember I wanted to do a deal with Bic at the millennia because I used the different colors for drawing timelines to differentiate between BC and AD. And what happened was when the new millennium started, many people thought it began in 2000. But it didn't. It began in 2001.
Because there was no zero, right?
There's no zero.
Yeah.
But everybody was celebrating. Oh, the numbers changed.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if you remember, they thought planes would fall from the
Oh
sky.
yeah.
All
The
of this
Y2K thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a thing where you mentioned it before. Critical thinking is really important. That we actually put together as much core information, get our core information correct. So, for instance, a simple thing about time: the Romans added 2 months to the solar year. Julius Caesar, Augustus Caesar, July and August, and displaced September, October, November, December. So we went sept, which means 7, went to the 9th month. Oct, that means 8, went to the 10th month. Nov, meaning 9, went to the 11th, and Dec, meaning 10, to the 12th. So every year we go out of sync, but because, so what? It doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So this is the thing about just being aware. If they can trick us with that one and not remind us about the correct counting and the meaning of the names, what else is being tricked about?
Okay. So that takes us to our fourth question and your development of your timeline. So as a high school instructor, you were teaching history to your students and you found that they had a difficult time understanding history. And so the creation of your timeline laid history out in a linear fashion, but showed history relative to the cultures of other people, histories that were happening simultaneously. So take our listeners through your timeline, how you came up with the idea and what the objectives are within the creation of your timeline and connecting it to ancestral time.
The first timeline I ever drew, I found a copy the other day, was in 1987. And it was an argument I was having at college, teacher training college, with some of the lecturers, because being of mixed parentage, my mother's English, my father's Igbo, I was saying, well, how come there's not respect given to the African and everything's dominated by the European? So what I did, I sort out, I was reading, researching, and I did a comparative line with the Greeks, ancient Greece, which they were saying was the oldest European civilization. And so I went to the ancient African civilization of what I thought then I used to call Egypt. Kemet wasn't on my radar or that understanding at the time. So I did 2 comparisons and just drew them side by side. The next time I got into, there was an argument in school. No, a school teacher asked me, a maths teacher asked me, do you have any information about the pyramids? I said, enough, what element? She says, I heard that Pythagoras' theory was used to build the pyramids. So I said, nonsense, because I was new to the knowledge. So I was hasty, I was ignorant, the way I responded. I had to always apologize about that, but it's only through learning, maturing, and whatever. So
Wisdom,
what
they call
happened
it.
was, sorry?
I said wisdom is what they call
Wait,
it.
I've heard of that before.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
It's coming your way. You live long
Hopefully.
enough, you'll experience.
Hopefully. So I'll pray for it. So what happens is, I went to my friend's house. His mom was asked to borrow a ruler. So what I did, I drew a continuum from like 5000 BC to AD 2000. And then I put on the birth date of Pythagoras and where they said the pyramids were built. And it's like 2080 years before. So it would be like me claiming that I'd invented something in AD 1 now.
Mm-hmm.
So that was when I did that. And then I came across 1989, a fantastic video, which is online now, called Free Your Mind, from the For the People series, by your good friends, Listervelt Middleton and Asa G. Hilliard III. And Free Your Mind really did kind of kick. And what he did, however, Brother Asa put down a vertical timeline with the information. I read from left to right. And I later found out about the kinetic relationship between the inner world and the outer world moving this way. So I did this horizontal line and basically put all the information from Dr. Hilliard's vertical line onto the horizontal line. I was pleased that in 2007, I did send a copy. He gave me his blessing, and I did send a copy down to him. Unfortunately, it was the time of his passing. I don't know if he received it or not. But I started doing the different editions of the timeline. One first in 2002. And then we just got to this latest one, which is packed full of information. I call it the net copy because net or neath is the creator concept of nature of the creation. And her symbol, one of her symbols, you can see behind me here, which is the weft and the wone of weaving.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like the weaving together of the universe. And so that point of origin. So that's how I put on the timeline so it becomes easy to see the period called BC and see the period of AD and then see where things happened in time. So for instance, I'll give you an example. As you know, I'm a mischief maker. And I did a session in Manchester Metropolitan University is on a course called Understanding Africa. So I posed the question to the audience made up of students, lecturers, members of the public, etc. I asked them what they thought the role of the Christian church was when the Romans first invaded Britain. What did the Christian church do? And it was a 20 to 25 minute reasoning, arguments, and everything else, or whatever. You know, they would have collaborated with the Romans. No, they went against the Romans. No, they led resistance against the Romans. No, they were healing the people if they were injured by the Romans. They probably did peace deals with them, brokered peace deals with the Romans. So after 25 minutes, I said, could anybody tell me what year the Romans invaded Britain? And someone said 55 BC. There was no Christian church. I asked them a redundant question, but they could not, because of the mental conditioning by religion, they could not imagine there was a time without a Christian church. And so that was just an exercise. And so it allows us to look at things in historical context. And that's what the timeline's about.
Okay, well, good. Well, listen, I just got a note from my engineer. Do we still need to do a PSA? If so, I can pause so you can do that.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Let's run a PSA then.
We're living proof in alert that we're two from the good black man and we're a winner.
On Monday, December 16th at 9 a.m., Uhuru Movement founder Chairman Amalia Shatella, known to some as Joseph Waller, along with two leaders of the movement's white solidarity and reparations component, Penny Hess and Jesse Neville, will walk into the federal courthouse in Tampa to be sentenced for the crime of speaking out for reparations, justice, and peace. In September, they were found not guilty of acting as Russian agents, but guilty of conspiring to act as Russian agents. Called a baseless and contradictory ruling, they are appealing the conviction. The Black community and all who believe in justice are invited to attend the hearing in Tampa on December 16th and support the call for not one day in prison. More info at handsoffyuhuru.org.
I don't mind living here to show the world we have no fear.
This is Tony Browder. You're listening to The Browder File here with our special guest, Paul Obinna. We're talking about time and something that is a man-made construct, something that we all have to be accountable for, and that we never seem to have enough of and can never get back if we misuse it. So, Paul, what has been the impact of your timeline, first on the students in your classroom, and then the general public? How people responded to how you've laid out time and shown them the relationship between the forces that have constructed time and constructed our memories of what happened along this timeline?
The key thing that always happens is that they always go to what they know. That's one of the key things. When they look at the timeline, they'll go and find what they know. So, of course, for many people, they're looking for Christianity, the religion. But then one of the key components is that they look for enslavement. And they say, and when it says, oh, slavery, and they go like, oh, where's slavery? And they're like, huh? And then they look at this little piece of, I put it in blue, where you got the Iberian enslavement by the Portuguese and Spanish. And then you got the Northern European enslavement by England, well, France, England, Holland, and then nearly all the countries that went out. I don't think Germany didn't really figure, but even Norway and Denmark had a go, you know.
Yeah, Italy,
now,
yeah.
When they see that, they go like, huh? And then if I roll the timeline out and then show them the Turkish and then Arab going back in time, enslavement from AD 642, they're going like, oh, right. And then what I do then, roll it and continue rolling it and continue rolling it. And they go like, what? And then they realize they can see visibly, they can visualize the entrapment into the corral. They can see that short piece of history that people keep referring to us in. And so that Africans have got no history. They come out with things like that. They even say that, they try and say Egypt is not in Africa. And I said, well, try walking down to Aswan then and see how long that takes. You'll find out if you're in Africa or not. So they come out with all kinds of reasons and excuses. Say it was other people from outside of Africa who built certain civilizations in Africa, etc. So like a guy called, I think it's called Miners, he did a thing called climatic determinism. And yeah, to say that the climate in Africa was not conducive for high levels of thought.
Right. It was too hot for people to be intellectuals, right?
Just too hot. So what happens? What happens is with the timeline, it's really good about, is what Lonnie Liston Smith sang in his song Expansions, expand your mind. And so go from the point of restriction to this whole powerful. Now think about this, Tony. If we put it in this, that of 20 generations of 25 years, which people like to keep talking about the 500-year period, to make one person of 20 generations takes 1,057,474 people. In that's in me now, just of 20 generations. So think about that's just 500 years, and keep thinking about if we were to go back. And then, so there is an optimum level where they're going to be coming through. But think about it's like having a plug on sorry for you all, you only got 2 pins in it in the plug. We have 3. So you're so wrong. So what happens is you've got the plug, which they call the male fitting in engineering, and the socket, that's the female fitting in engineering. And the male plugs in too to get the power, because the power's held in the female. That's a set. That's net or neath. That's the power. That's the right hemisphere of the brain holding that genetic information. So the power, I always remember I was with Professor Small up in New York. We're on the train going into Manhattan. And I remember he was sat down, and then a lady got on who was heavily pregnant. And he jumped up straight away. And as she was sitting down, he said, I'm not going to be sitting down while you're here impersonating God or doing the work of God, i.e. creating life. So the womb, the mother's womb, is that generative meeting point of millions of ancestors coming down, the generations coming down into that one. So this is one thing you said to me when I designed this latest time, the 7th edition of the timeline. And I said, how do I improve it? What you said to me was, you can't paint, you don't paint a mustache on the Mona Lisa, is what you said. But then I said, how do I do it? And you said, put something about genetics on there. So down the line, which carries all the dates on the timeline, there's a DNA helix going all the way down from the front cover right to the back cover. And that's a mitochondrial DNA carried by women that we as males tap into. It's the throne crown of a set. It's the throne crown of lineage. And that's what the timeline is showing, hopefully clearly.
So, you know, a couple of things that I can talk about with crystal clarity regarding your timeline is that when I have used that in demonstrations and I show folk that area in blue, which is the enslavement corral, that small little segment, and how that represents less than 1/10 of the entire African narrative, yet we've been socialized to believe that our story begins here. And so it's so critically important that we understand the rest of the story, what preceded, you know, our enslavement. And your timeline does that so well, Paul. The other thing that you've embellished upon this timeline is your acknowledgement of ancestors. What role does ancestors play in connecting the past with the present and the future? Why are ancestors important?
Look at it like an hourglass. If you have an hourglass and you turn the sands and it narrows down to the central point, and then it comes down and spreads out again. I look at it like this. The ancestors are like the sands of time coming down through us. And then what happens is our descendants will follow us. So that's the power of the hourglass principle. I know some of the brothers you're probably going to be talking to will be familiar with all of that, way beyond my comprehension of it. But once you got this narrowing down, and then we are here, the living, breathing, walking, talking representative of all those millions of people who lived before. And we're here, we're now, and it's about empowering ourselves so that we can pass that kind of information down to our descendants, because we're going to become the ancestors. And it's a thing which is natural, it's a natural phenomenon. And it's something which I say we should be proud of. You know, they always say the only thing you're certain of is death and taxes. Well, whichever you say, if I'm going to come down there and I know this thing, I've got to pass on as often as I can the kind of information which will help the next generation down. So we generate wealth, we generate health, we generate all those things which are of benefit. And just let me say this to you. My son, or Asa, or as you call Obiaku, he asked me one day, he said, Dad, he said, how long has the USA been about? And when I showed him on the flag on the timeline, he was literally looking like this, trying to see the rest of it. And he said, what, this? And I said, yeah. 1776 officially. And he went, what? I thought it, and it blew his head. So you see, I don't force anything on him, but I respond with clear, concise information when he needs things. So whether it's experiential from me or I'll give him a reference, that's what I'll do. And
So let me ask you this: in the 2 minutes that we have left, you take particular pride in educating your son and preparing him for life. How then would you recommend, as an educator, as an artist, as a thinker, how would you suggest that we educate others whose minds have been similarly corralled, who've been socialized into accepting a constricted perception of reality when in fact we live within a world of limitless bounty? How do you help people make that transition?
Personally, I am hoping that the timeline itself should be up in all Black homes or mixed homes with mixed parentage, people, whatever. And it's just there. And what you do is when you look at it, it's just a reminder that I'm more than the. Do you remember that book? It says, I love you this much.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a case of roll that timeline out and say, I love me this much. I know I've got this power of comprehension now of who and what I am and my capabilities. And let me say this. Certain people will look at the timeline and they go like, they say to me, Brother Paul, you go say, we have all this genetic power in us. We got these abilities. We built kingdoms. We built this. We were kings and queens and common folk too. We were, and I'm saying, yeah, of course, that's it. And they go like, wow. And I say, capability, look at this thing. The word education, Tony, has two roots to it. I go to Professor Maurice Craft, 1984. Educare, educere. Educare means to mold or form from outside in. Sit down, be quiet, learn this, regurgitate, I'll give you an exam. But then the educere means to lead out the genetic potential that's within us. And people go, So I talk to educators, and if you ever ask the educators, they'll say, what does education mean? They'll go like, educere means to lead out your, and then I'll say, can you show me in your practice how you do that? And usually it's like, So what I'm saying, we need both. We need both of them so we get a balance within ourselves. So by having a timeline there or whatever, having the timeline there, you should just be able to look at that, go past it and go, wow, it's a reminder. I'm here, living, breathing, walking, talking, representative of all of that. But there are other people who turn around, look at it and go like, look what the white man did to us. I go like, get over it, man. We're here to live. We're here to live large. So that's what I say. Get a timeline, buy a timeline, put the timeline up, have it as a reminder. I'm doing some thanks to the sister who you met down, Winifred, Sister Winifred down in Alabama, because of she came up with the idea of having like a family heirloom folded into a leather pouch, so that it becomes something that you can look at, pull out, and talk to your to your children, grandchildren about. And so that we have this long history, and this is our part here. We come in this little bit here.
Yeah.
And we're going to expand that out.
So, Paul, listen, man, I appreciate you for all you've done, all that you continue to do, and all that you will in the future. We're going to be talking with you more in the next year. We're going to be talking more about the timeline and why it's so important. But you made several important comments. One is that this timeline is an item that everyone needs to have in their household, particularly since we live at a time where people are trying to limit the education of all people, restrict the teaching of Black history, African history. So educating ourselves, removing ourselves from this corral, as you call it, this constricted way of seeing life and living our lives is important. So thank you so much for being a guest on the show, Paul. We're going to have you back. And as we wrap up this edition of the Browder File, we have an hour which is divided into 4 quarters, and this 4th quarter is coming to an end. As we end this episode of the Browder File, our next 3 shows, December the 18th, 25th and January the 1st will be preempted because of special programming here at the station. So I will return with a new show and a new guest on January the 8th of 2025. So in the meantime, as I close out this year, this show for this year, I want to encourage you to continue to show WPFW some love. Remember them as we move towards the end of the year. I want to encourage you to keep your dial locked at 89.3 FM. Up next is Margaret Kimberly with Black Agenda Radio. I want you to tune in at 8 o'clock to hear Donald Temple and Loveology, followed by Jordan Strudwick with Late Night Jazz, the Blue Note edition. He'll be on from 10 until midnight. So PFW is a place that honors you and respects you. We ask that you return the love. Consider them as you consider your gift-giving activities for the year. So I will return in 3 weeks. And until you hear my voice again, I want to leave you with love. I want to always encourage you to think about life, to unearth all the beautiful things around you. And as Maurice White tells us every week, there ain't no beauty. You got to make some beauty. Tony Browder, have a happy new year, happy holidays. I'll see you in 2025. Okay, so good. So we are done with recording. All right, this is Tony Browder. Welcome to the 5th quarter. We're continuing our conversation today with Paul Obinna, and we closed out the last quarter with Paul talking about the hourglass, talking about time. And I always keep an hourglass behind me because I'm very conscious about time. I'm very conscious about how I use my time. And so this discussion today is in keeping with my appreciation for the limited time that we have and the unlimited things that we can do within this limited time if we use our thoughts and our time responsibly. So we're going to continue our discussion, and I've asked Paul to share with us a PowerPoint, and in this PowerPoint to highlight 7 hotspots along his timeline that will give us a greater understanding of who we are and how to manage our time as we prepare to live out our lives and ultimately become the ancestors that our descendants will inherit, and we will express ourselves through them. So, Paul, my friend, the floor is yours.
Okay, I'll go into there. I'm going to pull up here. And now slideshow, play from start. I'll get through maybe, I don't know. We'll see how far we got.
Okay.
I'll sprint it. Because it's been recorded, I'll move quickly.
Okay.
The Weaver symbol I showed before it is a very important thing of the blending of mind, body, spirit, the material world, the spiritual world into the mental world. Those of you who know the book from Wayne Chandler, you may have mentioned last week, the book his book Ancient Future, which is a take on the Kabbalion. So in the Kabbalion, they actually say in the Hermetic principles that all things are mental. Everything is mental, goes through the psychological. So the lineage timeline, it's the 7th edition. I'm talking about the 7 hot spots. So we'll see how far we'll get. What I've got here, this is the timeline cover. And what you can actually see there, I've highlighted the central part with I spoke about this in the session, about the yellow line, which will bear the dates, and then the mitochondrial DNA going down. At the top is the Bedet, which basically says, know thyself, and that being the centralized element, you are the center of the universe. You'll see there's a white circle with a white central dot. That's called a monad. The monad is a symbol of the creator going back to the essence, the essential elements of creation. And if you ever remember Leonardo da Vinci had Vitruvian Man, the naked man who is, he's a naked man who is holding his arms out to the side, and then he raises his hand and as well, and his legs are apart. So if you go to they have the square. If how's he standing as a crucifix? He touches the square. When his arms are up and his legs are apart, it touches the circle. If you go to the center of the square, it goes to the genitals. It's the external building. It's the creation through our genetic power. But if you go to the center of the circle, it goes to the navel, which is our connection to the mother and was our gateway from the spiritual world into the material world. And remember, the word material is based on the word mater, meaning mother. So, and we created by a mathematical process of binary cell division for another time. What we got here, this is the cover that says the Potomac Net Edition. This is the version sent to Tony last night, actually. Potomac being the river which carries the flow, the waters of the womb, the river Nile going into the seas, the massive seas, and then all the waters flowing back into the oceans, into the seas. So it says the net edition because this is the edition that has a lot of information in it and needs to be broken down, and we will be getting around to doing that. So that represents the flow. Those of you who know rap music and the way that people speak and the way that they come with a flow. It's that flow of the word. It's the flow of the physicality. That is one of the key things that the timeline is intended to put forward. Here we call opening the potential. Here's the egg. And there's a throne crown of lineage. There's the spot, if you will, the germ, the egg, and then here is the key to open those things, to open up the genetic potential. That's the intention behind the timeline. So that's just looking at the cover. Here we have the heart, the symbol of the heart. This is similar to the symbol that Tony found in the 25th dynasty tombs in Kemet. This is the Adinkra symbol for the heart. Remember that the heart is the first of the organs to form, not the brain, the heart. And when the heart fires up, the heart continues until the day that person leaves this realm, the physical realm. And so what we have here is the symbol of Sankofa. And Sankofa is a bird that's moving forward, but is recounting, looking back, and holds the egg in its mouth. I always say it's very important. It says go back and fetch it and correct it if needed. What's the it? To me, it's the genetic potential that's held in the mother's mitochondrial DNA and in the people, the human beings that she creates in her womb. So I always look at the word heritage. It says her, it, age. It's the age of it in her, not himitage, heritage. So it's that role, the importance of our mother principle, which has been put forward in many cultures around the world. Area 2, I encourage people to always look at the brain hemispheres so that we can understand how we've been trained to think and trained to believe. And so very much you'll see that our development, even though it starts very much in our right hemisphere of our brain, it moves across into the left hemisphere of our brain as we go through junior high school, and then on to college, and then on to university, etc. We go more and more left brain specific unless we're in subjects like the arts, which require us to have spatial awareness, etc. So please, I ask, pause the video and please have a look, take this in, and take in about this respect for the right and left hemisphere. That's the word individual does not mean one person. Well, people think it means one person. Individual, it says in, divide, dual. We have a masculine and feminine division within us. This is in world cultures for thousands of years. They've expressed this thing. And as you see at the bottom here, it says the corpus callosum, the chief communicator. In Kemet, they would show you Ma'at twinned with Chuhuti. You have the feminine and the masculine. So let me just say this. The brain is like the earth, as both have hemispheres. What happens in the brain, we call the mind. And what happens on the earth, we call the world. Therefore, whomever controls the mind controls the world. But further, whomever controls their mind will control their world. And I encourage you to do your best to find out about the way we're trained to think and the way we think and the capability. You'll see at the bottom of the across the page, it says creativity and epigenetics. And in brackets, it says talent, trauma, and tenacity. The reason I put that, people think that epigenetics is a study of inherited trauma. It's way beyond that. Remember, you can awaken your consciousness to your contributions, that the capabilities you're there. And there's some fantastic practitioners there whose work show about the capabilities that we have. Education, origin, and meaning, educare, to mold or form from outside in, that's outside in learning, and then educere, to lead out, that's inside out learning. I said, which dominates in Western and Northern culture, in education, sorry, and I put it to you, I submit that the educare overwhelmingly dominates, but we need both. That's what I'm saying. It's a synthesis between the two. Area 3. These are color codes. Across the top of the line there, it says the top line symbols represent the zodiacal ages of 2,150 years in duration, approximately. So we entered into the age of Pisces in the equivalent date AD1. That is meant to be the quantification. Of course, over that time, it takes time to roll in, like we're rolling into Aquarius now. But please, if you get a timeline, when you get your timeline, take a look across the top and you'll see these durations of what's called the Great Year. Here we see the central light yellow line representing human lineage, or I spell it history with a Y, because hist is a Greek word for womb. So there's the external story from information given to us about history externally. Then there's the internal genetic power, which we call history with a Y. And it's that place where we evolve, we created in our mother's womb. So we call that the golden thread, which is a natural genetic science of mitochondrial DNA. Sorry. So there we have, I remember it was Tony who made said the true AI is ancestral intelligence. So there you've got the structure, the differentiation between the red line and the blue line. Red line before Christ, blue line, Anno Domini, year of the Lord. The green numbers define the general historical context of centuries. So the golden thread of history is along the timeline, showing the mitochondrial DNA. And at the bottom, please remember this. Kemet is pre-dynastic to round about, this is the short chronology agreed by European scholarship, to round about 5,200 BC. Don't let them trick you into thinking Kemet only begins at the dynastic period in 3,200. It existed way before that, the culture coming from the south up the river to try and say that, oh yeah, it's outside in development into Africa, because many people believe Africans are not capable of doing anything except be slaves, etc. So what we've got here, this is the work of Asa Hilliard. And on the time, you'll see Kemet, you'll see the cultural duration, and you'll also see the political duration. The cultural duration goes past 332 BC, when the Greeks and the Romans, and then Romans later came in, because the Greeks and the Romans practiced the Kemetic culture. They copied. It was, they emulated it. But the political control of Kemet eventually ran out when the Greeks the Persians came in, and then the Greeks came in. So please remember this. You have that cultural and political line on the timeline, and it's telling you about a continuum of a culture that lasted over 4,000 years. No one else has got a precedent like that. 4,000 years. Along the timeline, you'll see also this alarm clock and the chronological comprehension you'll see that symbol along the timeline. Say, this is something to practice and look at and build our power of comprehension of chronology. I'll try one more. The corral explained. A corral is an enclosure for horses, cattle, etc. It's an enclosure for capturing wild animals. I use it to mean a state of unconsciousness produced to maintain a restricted, confused, and dehumanized mentality. So basically, the decagon, the symbol, represents base 10, a 10-sided shape, a symbol representing the time capture of decade, century, and millennium. So let me just jump back up to what happens in the corral. We have all these different things. It could be politics, economics, it can be gender, sexuality, sex, race. These are all things which have been put before us to create animosity, arguments, etc. So what I ask you to do is this, is to look at the news, north, east, west, and south, the news, and start to analyze the kind of information given to us to promote things like fear, anger, resentment, etc. We mentioned before about the power of myth to understand the largest levels of time, the precession of the equinoxes. Myths were told, and one of the greatest myths or timeless truths is that of the story of Osset versus Set. Osset versus Set. And what happens is the Osset, she brings about completion, whereas Set is depletion. It's about dividing and conquering. So on the timeline, you'll see a reference to the myth of Osset and Set. And what you'll see there in the background, I have a faded copy of a statue of Niccolo Machiavelli, the father of the modern science of politics. And his famous quote is divide and rule, divide and conquer. So this is just a complete area 4. Pythagoras and the pyramids. Like I said, Pythagoras' theory was used to build the pyramids. Here's a timeline showing going back to 5000 BC in red, and then going through to AD 3000. So we're in the 3rd millennium AD. But then what I want to show you is this thing here. Here's Pythagoras. He lived around 530 BC. And here is the step pyramid at Saqqara, which in the agreed short chronology was the first of the pyramids. This is where the Imhotep, the architect, in his role as architect, was said to have formed this pyramid around this 2660 BC. There's Imhotep, he who comes in peace. And what we have is a duration of 2080 years on the short chronology from when Imhotep built the pyramids, obviously with the theorem, which later became known as Pythagoras' theory, 2080 years before Pythagoras lived. So I want to put that there. Also, sorry, there's Imhotep. Images like this have been designed to keep us away from Kemetic information. So here we have Boris Karloff as the mummy. Here's the image of Pythagoras. And then here we have the latest rendition of the mummy, where he's an evil despot, an evil person. I'm not being stopped, so I'm just going to do this here. On the timeline, this looks very confusing. But once you get your eye in, I don't know, I always say to people, it's like driving a car. When you first drive a car, it can be very, very confusing until later. I've seen sisters putting their makeup on while smoking a cigarette and having a drink, and they've been doing all kinds of stuff when they're driving along. A bit crazy. And then I know that I open things and check. Once you get familiar with the workings of something, I guarantee you, once you get your eye into this timeline, you'll start to understand certain things. What we got to here, as Tony was talking about, this point here is the Arab enslavement, the beginning of Arab enslavement of Africans. And then what we have here is the Turkic enslavement of Africans here, the Ottomans. Up here is the Iberian enslavement process, which is starting 1441. Iberian meaning Spanish and Portuguese. Now, Iberia was one at one time, but the first people in 1258 to expel the Moors from Spain, they'd gone in AD 711. The first people to expel them in 1258 were what became known as the Portuguese. And then what you had later in the Spanish removed the Moors in 1492. But then here, at this point here, you see the Northern European enslavement process. And so these are things which are highlighted on the timeline. So I'll finish with this one. The lineage timeline, cultural capital. The lineage timeline is designed to clearly display the true extent of the range of the African historical continuum way past the restricted focus, the corralled focus of European, Arab, and Turkish enslavement and colonization. European colonialism, therefore, this is what I'm showing you here. This is a picture of my son when he was 6 years old. But that's how much, if he's dealing with European colonialism, that's how much history he will get. If it's about European enslavement from AD 1441, he'll get this much of the timeline. If he goes to Arab colonialism and enslavement at AD 641, he will receive this much information. So what happens here? The increased range acknowledges the vast store of genetic power held in the African lineage of the mother's DNA, the golden thread, the source of the potential cultural capital from which we can draw. And what happens is this. We have this sense of continuum, 6,450 BC to date, the African historical continuum of civilization, and it goes back here. This is to pre-dynastic Kemet and beyond. So what I want to do here, in general, Black people are taught a limited, enslaved, and colonized version of history, justified by religion and endorsed by the nonsense of racist ideologies. And when I'm saying justified by religion, I'm talking that certain people will start saying that we've had a deserved abuse. And so want to break out of that. Here's a point of Judaism, 1530 BC, when Moses, the lawgiver, gives the 10 Commandments. Along here, this is BC AD. This is a point that I mentioned before, Dionysius Exiguus. He constructed the idea, the concept of BC AD for Pope John I. And then at this point here, this is where Islam comes in, AD 622, from the time of the Hijra, or the flight. And then here is what we call Ma'at. Ma'at, the 42 negative declarations of Ma'at, Ma'at being the cosmology of ancient Kemet. And it's from that, the 42 negative declarations would have been learned by Moses, who was raised in Pharaoh's house as a prince. And because of this, we know that, and Acts 7:22, the book of Acts 7:22 says that Moses was raised knowing all the wisdom of the Egyptians, should have been Kemites, and grew to be a man powerful in words and deeds. Finally, sorry, I said I was going to stop. Please check this. This is a celestial sky of ancestral reverence, sorry. And we're talking about ancestral intelligence. Here we have generative power. Here it's actually, you'll look here about the libation protocol by Brother Kimani Nahusi. You can learn about that. But also it says 20 generations of 1,048,575 people in 500 years. Over here, there's a song. Tony told me about the song by Duke Ellington, but he said it wasn't actually produced, but it was recited by Brock Peters at Duke Ellington's funeral. They say that people turn into stars when they die and live again in the midnight sky. So you'll see the rest of the song there, the lyrics. What you'll see, it says, know yourself, AfricanAncestry.com. It says it's got Rafiki from The Lion King, and there you'll see Madge Sinclair and brother there, but who played Surabi and Mufasa in The Lion King. It was their voices. And so Christianity-wise, we're going to go to honor your father and their mother, the fifth commandment, to have your days living long. Know the truth shall set you free, in the book of John. And there's no religion higher than truth, is a quote by Helena Petrovna Blavatsky, a one that I love. So the last part, your birthday. Please remember this, that your birthday is Mother's Day. That's the day your mother became your mother. That is a very important thing. That a woman with 5 children in general will only have one birthday a year. So I encourage people to celebrate your birthday. And that 1,048,575 people in your DNA on your 500 years of lineage, please welcome them into your life via your mother, by celebrating and giving thanks to your mother for creating you in this life.
Paul, thank you so much, man. That's a masterful lesson from a master teacher. And, you know, as we move into the new year, we're going to need tools that will help us understand who we are and who we carry within us. So I'm appreciative of the time and energy that went into your crafting the timeline and then developing all of the concepts and ideas to help explain it to others. So we're going to be distributing the timeline here in the States, and I'm going to look at doing something within the coming year, 2025, to bring you here to DC, so we can have you share your talents with us. We are in dire need of gaining control of our minds. We're going to be faced with some very difficult times with this incoming administration, and we're going to need all hands on deck and all the tools that we have at our disposal in order to hold the devil at bay and find the ways that we can recreate heaven within our hearts and within our communities, brother. And you're going to play a very important role in that process. So I thank you. I appreciate all that you've done for us and all that you continue to do. And I look forward to building with you as long as I have breath in my body.
Okay, sir.
Thank you, brother.